and we're going to be watching the video together, so you guys can kind of follow along, and you guys can watch it for yourselves. Tell me what you think, and I'll be providing all of my kind of sources to you guys, so we can maintain kind of like a fair and balanced reporting kind of strategy. We will get into Gamergate later. We'll get into that. Hi, Butter. It's good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. So right now, here is the video, the first video I'm going to be linking. This is the Tropes versus Women, body language, and the male gaze. And we're going to start out at 4 minutes and 42 seconds in that video. If you would care to watch the video with me, or otherwise you can just not click on the video and I'll show it to you anyways. So I'm going to drag this video over here. I'm going to be doing a lot of dragging and dropping, so I hope you guys bear with me on this. So we're going to kind of take a listen to this really quickly, and then we're going to analyze what she's saying, and we're going to kind of go over what she's saying as we watch it together. Okay, so just bear with me as I get this set up for you guys, and so we can watch it together. I'm going to take off the image, and then I need to shrink myself down, actually, because I'm so ginormous that I'm blocking the video. So we're gonna shrink myself down, and then I'll blow myself up again. All right, so let's give it a watch.
In 1975 by feminist film critic Laura Mulvey, and refers to the tendency for the visual arts to assume and be structured around a presumed masculine viewer, or in this case, player. The male gaze manifests when the camera takes on a perspective of a stereotypical heterosexual man. An indisputable example of this is when the camera lingers, caresses, or pans across a woman's body, although it's not always that obvious. In games, it can be as simple as the in-game camera resting so that a character's butt or breasts or both are center-line. It can be a cutscene that rests on a woman's butt. It can be clothing that they are wearing, or the way they talk, or it can be as basic as the way a female character moves around the game world. The male gaze reinforces the notion that man looks and the woman is looked at. Or as art critic John Berger explains in the 1972 book Ways of Seeing, men act and women appear. Men look at women. Women watch themselves being looked at. This determines not only most relations between men and women, but also the relation of women to themselves. To be clear, the male gaze is not a hard and fast rule. It's a theoretical concept that is meant to help us understand the sometimes subtle and nuanced ways in which our culture influences media, and the way that media in turn can shape and reinforce existing gender dynamics in our culture. The male gaze is also not...
Okay, so right there, that is like her little blurb. That's the excerpt that I kind of wanted to go over, is that excerpt. So we're gonna, as she explained, that was Anita Sarkeesian, and just in case anybody didn't know, and attack up. No, there's no attacking. What I wanted to do is kind of go over what she said. As you can see, like when you look at what the male gaze is, she specifically mentions what the male gaze, and she talked about how the camera will pan or focus on a specific body part of a woman. She provided several examples in her in that footage that we just watched. So off of that footage, we saw several video games. I think we saw Mass Effect 3. Or Mass Effect 2. I know we saw Mass Effect. So we saw Mass Effect, we saw Bayonetta, we saw Grand Theft Auto, we saw and then several other games. We also saw a Marilyn Monroe movie. We saw Transformers. Oh, Tomb Raider was another one. And then several other movies where men's or advertisements, like for Budweiser, where thank you Scuzz or Buzz. I'm glad you like my tie. We saw how the gaze or the pander or the pan of the camera, there was a specific emphasis on a specific body part. So when you looked at these examples that she showed, it's very clear that within our media, oftentimes we find a lot of examples of this over-objectification of women. And you'll see, just based on those examples, that developers, cinematographers, photographers, people who are involved in like the visual or the visual medium, they emphasize certain things, or they position the camera, they position media in such a way to film those specific body parts. You saw breasts, you saw butts, you saw, a very like lithe, thin form, and it was meant to specifically target those objects. And essentially what it is fan service. It's fan service for a male audience that a male audience is supposed to enjoy. Is that true? I think based on what we saw, there are a lot of examples of this, and I'm sure that everybody in this channel can say, I've played a game, or I've watched a movie, I've seen an advertisement on TV, or I've seen it in a magazine, where the camera was positioned in such a way that it specifically showed off this aspect of a female. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen a commercial for Carl's Jr., but those kinds of advertisements specifically target a very specific demographic, and they're meant to incite, like, oh, you associate pleasure with beauty. You see a very beautiful woman stretched out across a car, displayed in such a way that her breasts are poised in the air, and she's putting a juicy burger in her mouth, and it's dripping down her chin. Very, 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 very sexualized. Is it gratuitous? I think in most of those cases that we saw, that is very much so probably the case. I think it's fair to say that that's the case, that it is in fact over-sexualized. And we can see examples of that right there. Just as we saw. If I can think of another example, I'm trying to think of kind of off my head, like off the fly, of something where I've seen that. Carl's Jr. was a great example, I think, that I could immediately picture. I don't know. Hello, Joe. I don't know if any of you guys can picture that. Have any of your own examples of where a woman might have been objectified in such a way, or over-sexualized. I would love to hear your opinions in chat. Go ahead and throw them at me. If you have an example of over-sexualization of women in the media, share it. I would love to see that. And I think it is really interesting to see how people market certain things. I can say, as a white straight male, that watching those Carl's Jr.'s ads that I spoken about previously, it did made me hungry. It made me want to go eat. You're associating the business of a very beautiful, highly sexualized woman with this burger. It makes me associate, though, that food with a very good-looking woman, with a very attractive woman, a very nice-looking woman. I was, okay, that makes me want to eat that food. I'm sure it makes a lot of men want to play certain games like Bayonetta. I personally, playing Bayonetta, I thought it was a very visually appealing game. I didn't know much about the story personally. I knew it was kind of like a Devil May Cry game. It more focused on shooting than slashing, I would say, and it featured a female protagonist as opposed to a male protagonist, and she was very, very sexy. That's what I saw off of Bayonetta. I didn't particularly want to play the Bayonetta, the game, for the story. I played it for the visual medium, because I saw a very, very sexualized woman that I found attractive, kicking ass. I thought that was really cool. Okay, she's shooting all these crazy angels, blowing them out of the sky, and that's very appealing to look at. Graphically, it looks nice, and it's also very appealing to see a very sexy woman kicking ass in such a way. I found that very appealing. So we have examples of companies and media companies, or people that work in the visual medium, presenting women in an over-sexualized way to push a product. I'm just by looking at a kind of like chat, I'm seeing that some people might have other opinions or other examples. But we can see. We are actually going to talk about males, how this affects males too. So this isn't just so everybody knows, we're not going to just focus on females. We're talking about sexism as a whole. Now, there, like as I've said before, the ongoing narrative in popular media is the fact that it's targeting specifically women. And that's why we're focusing first and foremost, like I think, on women. So right off the bat, we saw Anita Sarkeesian talk about this objectification of that. Of those body parts, of those female individuals being over sexualized, of them being presented in such a way that might not be particularly flattering in every case. She goes on to talk about in this video not just picturing a woman in a certain way, even body posture. She uses a clip from Destiny of how and she shows the differences between a man and a woman and how they sit down in the game of Destiny. So let's go ahead and kind of take a look at that really quick. Here, I'm going to shrink myself down, and we're going to get right back on to this video. So here is her clip from the game Destiny. And this is how a male is sitting down in the game of Destiny. So they're sitting down.
When a female character sits down, however, it's a completely different story. She sits like a delicate flower. This is supposed to be a hardened space warrior, and yet she's sitting around like she's Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
Okay, so she's sitting down like a delicate flower is Anita's perception on this video. Judging based on what we see just from another example of how women are treated differently in a, if you want to say maybe objectified or over-sexualized way, we see that just the differences between how men and women sit is portrayed differently in video games. Latex outfits. Yeah, latex outfits. Yeah, actually, that's a really good example, Joe, of how they might sit. Here we go. So we can go on to. She goes on to talk about how men and women even walk differently, and she talks about hip sway. And hip sway is different, and how it's grossly exaggerated in many games, and how in many games. Here's another example. I'm going to show you. Take off the image again. I might just have to. I should have. This is something. This is a learning experience for me on this podcast. I'm learning. I should probably have a separate scene set up where I can just do monitor capture and switch back and forth between the two. It looks like. So I think I might do that. Let's watch this. Oop, there I go. I just messed that up. Okay, there's Catwoman. She's talking about Catwoman in this.
Catwoman from the Arkham series.
So you look at how Catwoman moves in this. You can see her hips bouncing, and you can see how her jumpsuit is zipped, how it's zipped on her. And now she's going into Jill Valentine about how her whole body is allegedly moving. And now we're getting into Assassin's Creed. And the differences between how like a man and a woman will look. So if you see here, you can see the movement of the hips. And now she's showing how men kind of walk in this video. And her perception is that the hip sway is rapidly different if you look at here from here. So it's almost like this as to a man's is a much more subtle look. So you'll be seeing in this body language video. She goes on to talk about how even men and women are portrayed at such a fundamentally different level that even the way they walk is different and very sexualized. So you saw exaggerated hip sway. Now, a lot of people will say that hip sway is actually it's part of your biology. Women typically have wider hips due to the fact that they are able to birth children and they carry children, and that accounts for why women walk differently, why there is a hip sway. Whether or not it is in fact sexualization or the fact that these developers are purely just kind of you think it's kind of like a model walk